Hi, everyone. We're here for the COVID-19 Parent and Caregiver Support Group, our second episode. I'm Vanessa Bieber, and I'm here with Sherry Reagan. Hey, Sherry.
Hi, Vanessa. Welcome, everybody. We are up to about, I think, close to 80 people in the group, and we're really excited. So many of you have joined us, and we hope that you can get a little out of this short presentation on self-care. Like we said in the first episode, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave the comments in the comment section on Facebook, but also you have our direct contact information under the description. So please feel free to reach out to us. So let's get started.
So first, we're going to start off by defining self-care. And, there's different ideas of what it is and isn't, but one definition that I really liked was the deliberately taking care of your well-being through restorative activities. And it's a habit or a practice in loving kindness towards self. One of the things that a self-care practice helps us to do is it helps us to connect with ourselves and to address our reaction to stress, to care for our physical and psychological health, to honor our emotional and spiritual needs, to foster healthy relationships, and to help us achieve equilibrium across multiple areas of our lives, so academic, professional, areas where we function as in different ways and we have different roles. What it is not indulgent or luxurious. So sometimes we get this idea, especially that, when you look at how much money is in a self-care industry of like full of spa treatments and things like that, that's not what we're referring to here, especially with parents and especially during this time. Those things aren't really accessible to us anyway. But what are practical ways that we start to really restore and fill ourselves up so that we have the energy and we have our, that we can really show up?
Right. And we want to talk a little bit why self-care is important. It keeps you emotionally regulated, which leads to improved qualities in your relationships with your children and with your partners and other family members and friends. And that leads to an improvement in life satisfaction. And then that further leads to an increase in life pleasure, and then ultimately the reduction of stress, which is what the purpose of this group is to help reduce the stress of parenting during this time. And there are 6 areas of self-care. Vanessa, where did you get this Venn diagram?
So this is from the University of Buffalo School of Social Work. We included them in the resources because they have done a lot of work in the area of self-care. And I also included Dr. Portia's TED Talk in there as well. And this was, so the Venn diagram looks at the different areas of our lives, our emotions, our mind, our psychology, work, relationships, spirit, and body.
So I really like how it broke down the 6 areas so that it lended itself to give you specific examples specific to those areas. So with work, I put in practical approaches on how you can practice the self-care. So it's not necessarily a facial, it's not necessarily getting your hair done or your nails done. These are things that are attainable and achievable during this time. So if you're working, actually take your breaks. You're allowed those breaks. You're given those breaks by law. So if you can, actually take your 15-minute breaks. Avoid eating and working at the same time during your lunch break. Like really shut it down so you have some time for yourself. And avoid answering calls and emails after hours. That can be hard, especially if you have a position where everything's an emergency. So, you'll have to organize that and such that it's responsible. And say no to extra tasks that will stretch your time too thin. So if you already know that you're really pushing it and barely able to meet deadlines and get what you need done, the worst thing to do is to take on more. So finding a professional way to create boundaries for yourself. And the purpose of this is so that you can reduce your stress, which essentially is under the umbrella of self-care. The next area that I provided examples for are for the body. So the research has shown that 20 minutes of moderate to intense cardio has been shown to balance the brain. So it literally affects the brain the same way medication would, but you have to do it regularly and you have to get your heart rate up. But that's one way you can practice self-care, because if you can balance your neurochemistry under states of stress, you're essentially going to feel better, because when it's out of sync and just not balanced, that's when you experience the depression and the anxiety and the burnout. Um, if that's not something you can do, if you're not able to do intense cardio or moderate to intense cardio, there's still benefits in walking daily. And then also, if you have time, I know this sounds crazy, but maybe resting during the day. I love in Europe and in Lebanon and certain other countries that you literally have built-in time to rest and take naps. And I think there's something really valuable to what that does to your brain chemistry. And then if none of this is appealing to you, you can choose a form of exercise that you enjoy, whether it be dancing or if it's yoga, but just commit to it and commit to doing it at least 4 to 5 times a week. And if that's a little bit too hefty to start off with, by all means, do it 2 times a week. And it's all about the path to getting there. And all these little steps are relevant and matter. And of course, diaphragmatic breathing, that's something really popular in the field just because it calms your nervous system down, which is heightened when you're experiencing stress, which is what a lot of parents are feeling right now with their children, especially with the school and everything. There's a Dr. Hyman, he's an integrative doctor. He really emphasizes taking advantage of using saunas if you have that, just a hot room, taking hot baths with Epsom salt, oils, just because it relaxes your muscles and starts to reset your brain. And there's something called progressive muscle relaxation exercises that you can look up online. There's tons of these videos out there. It literally is a systematic way to tense your muscles so that at the end of it all, you have relaxation. And so it literally makes sense because it's progressive. You do it one body part until you do your entire body. And at the end, it's been shown to reduce a lot of stress and anxiety. And of course, with the mind, meditation. That's meditation and mindfulness. Mindfulness is huge right now, and that's because it helps your mind to calm down. Listening to music has been shown to also help relax the mind, and then protecting time for yourself to do something just for you. Parents and caregivers tend to give their all to everybody else, and they're left depleted at the end of the day. And so it's okay for you to slow down and take some time just for you. And I've talked to some parents who are like, well, how do we do that? That's a different episode that we can focus on as far as like behavior management and teaching independent play skills. But start thinking about interests that you have outside of just parenting and raising children, and which I know is hard, right? So it's an option. And I like this one. You can do mindfulness when you exercise so that you're doing both at one time, which is a time saver for many of us that are really swamped right now. So there's a lot of walking mindfulness tutorials that are online that you can tap into to see if that's something that you can get into. You get the benefits of mindfulness and you get the benefits of the exercise. And also, I know this sounds strange, like petting an animal, spending a time with an animal. There's a reason why they have therapeutic animals at this point. That's why it's such a big deal, because a lot of the research has shown that the relationship that you have with an animal can reduce stress. And that is why it is a form of self-care. The goal is to reduce your stress. And then if you can, if you have a hobby of interest that you used to do and don't do now, this is a great time to revisit that. And that ties into just protecting some time for yourself to do those things. And I love this one. I posted something earlier about self-compassion, practicing daily the thoughts of self-compassion, being kind to yourself. There's more details in the mini blog that I put up on our group post, but please take some time and look into what self-compassion is and how that can really benefit your mind and benefit your mood, and how that does fall under self-care. And we have more examples here. Do you want to talk about this one? These?
Yeah, we talked about the area of emotions. I like to focus on the four primary emotions: happiness, sadness, anger, and fear. And part of what we can routinely do that takes care of those feelings is one, notice; two, have compassion; and three, have some acceptance and some room and space for them. And there's also having outlets for them. Um, you know we wrote down downloading mental health apps, that can kind of keep you in that awareness of what your mood is like, how it fluctuates, and give you some more data on maybe what influences your moods. Also reading self-help books related to emotions and emotional processing, and then talking to a professional if you're really concerned about the negative feelings and they're impairing your life, and really sitting down and isolating that time and creating that time for yourself to really pursue the work in a more serious way. Because I've had lots of people reach out to me and say, I've done a lot of work on my own for years, but I really feel like it's time to come in and see someone. And it can be helpful to have that kind of that sounding board, or that person who and whether it's a friend, a loved one, or someone who is specialized in doing this. With relationships, we have making time every week for a virtual social hour with friends, right? We get to
Mhm. Yeah.
this is part of our time before, even in prepping for this, it can be our social.
Makes a difference.
I hadn't seen any other friends today. Or if we're with family, letting the kids check in with family, and getting that face-to-face time, or even, hearing each other's voice. And then even setting up a date night while you're at home. The romance is kind of sometimes hard to, when we associate it in certain ways. So I know lots of couples I've talked to, it's like, well, now we don't have our date nights or our nights out. So making that a plan for while we're in, a romantic night in. Timeouts during arguments as a gift to yourself. Want to talk about that, Sherry?
Yeah. So if you're already in a heightened state, it's been a hard day, you've been parenting hard, you've been working, or it's just been just a difficult day with your children, the last thing you want to do for yourself is to dive into an intense fight with your partner.
Mm,
And I call it a gift because you're avoiding it right now when you're already escalated. You want to avoid saying things that you can't take back that could actually add to more tension in the future. So just, if you can, just take some time out and revisit conversations later after you've done maybe some other versions of self-care, so that you're more in a ready state to have a productive conversation. And I think I added this part: learning communication tips for effective communication. So right now, during this COVID crisis, it's very tense between parents and caregivers who are responsible for raising the children right now, responsible for their academics, their social life, for all aspects of their life. So learning how to really communicate and be assertive, but yet still empathetic and respectful is a much needed skill set right now, because everyone's a little bit heightened, and you really want, at the end of the day, for the needs of yourself, or for your children, you want all of those needs and concerns to be addressed, right? And so sometimes there's just magic in just how you communicate, and that essentially will reduce your stress at the end of the day. So that's why I put it in for self-care. And I'll finish this one off with spirit. So what that means is, how are you grounding yourself in your spirituality, and whatever denomination you're involved in. So I think acts of service to others, I saw that as a listed self-care coping mechanism, because that is a spiritual act for some people. So giving to other people. I have a friend that she works in the Rotary in Pasadena, and they're responsible for getting food and towels for homeless people right now. And that's really been keeping her going. And that's her self-care. And that's
mhm.
really important to her spiritually. And and you can still connect virtually with your religious community. So tapping into those resources. I know that many temples and churches are doing that for their congregations. And this is supposed to say read, but it says real, but read books relative to your practice. So if it's something about Buddhism, your Christianity, take some time and keep those things alive if that matters to you, because that is a form of self-care. It's about giving back to yourself.
And there is an added benefit to reading real books too, like
Yeah.
the paper, and rather than we're so digital. And I listen to most of my books because that just works for me. But now we're at how and where to start. So those were all like kind of the ways in which you can incorporate in all the different areas of your life, the ways that might naturally come up. I really like that about approaching a conversation with a regulated state so that you get more productive results. And that's the idea, is that you're putting things in so that you get the benefits of it. There's lots of benefits to when you have a great practice going.
And you have
So
to experiment, right, Vanessa? You have to kind of figure out which ones actually work for you. So
yeah.
there's a ton of examples there. So I don't want anybody to feel overwhelmed, like you have to target all 6 areas. Like you can just pick the areas that you think are most attainable to you and see if it works. Do some self-monitoring, right? And
Mm-hmm.
actually taking breaks didn't really help me to, today I still felt really burnt out, just so you're going to actually kind of take data on yourself to see what's working. And I think there's a lot of empowerment in that. Like you get to choose what you want to do, and you do have choices. But how and where to start?
Yeah, so I think about you, Sherry, with like the behavior analyst skills, and those are really helpful in thinking about how do we start new behaviors and like set ourselves up for success. That's how, when we would make interventions, that's the idea, right? Like we want them to be successful. So and so going about it that way too, like you enter that with that mentality. I know where I get stuck. I know what my challenges are. So don't set yourself up in that way, right? That's not going to benefit anyone. For many people, it's like, I want to do that. I just, by the end of the day, I don't. So setting an alarm, holding yourself, like, I'm not going to remember if I don't have an alarm telling me I have this coming up. I'm not that likely to remember. So even like I've talked to people about setting an alarm for a time for sleep, or a time to start your sleep time or your nighttime routine, because they're having trouble getting to sleep at the right time, and they keep cutting into their sleep time. And so it's a reminder that says, hey, you can start your sleep prep now. I know phones now remind you if you want to get 8 hours, but setting that reminder up for yourself, like even if it's by 2 o'clock, a 2 o'clock, hey, did you do that one new good, self-care thing that you had mentioned? Whatever it is, it's better if you make it something tangible, so you don't have to think about it when the alarm comes up. So you decide, all right, tomorrow I'm going to do a foot soak. So the alarm should say, or have an emoji for it. Is
First
that?
blanket statement says self-care, 5
Mm-hmm.
o'clock, right? Okay, I like that. Specific. Yeah.
Visual cues. So we've talked about like post-it notes, or, writing things, or even, if I put out all the stuff for a foot soak, if I take it and I put the towel in there and I put some stuff and I have it out, that goes into the next one, which is like prepping and setting up the environment. But what are some other, do you use any other visual cues other than like, like we talked about the post-its, or,
I do. I use the visuals of the post-its. Sometimes I'll take a picture of whatever it is I want to get done, and I'll make it my screensaver on my phone. So I'm constantly looking at my phone, and so that's a good visual cue for me. I also have calendars that are up in my office space and also on my refrigerator, and so I kind of put things there if it's something specific, like if it's a Zumba class, like I'll put it up there. And that works for me. But like I said, you get to cater this plan as parents in the best way that works for you. So I'm hoping that some will stick. What do you use? You use Post-its, Vanessa?
Yeah, and I mean, I've done vision boards in the past too, but that's more, that's not as much like cueing immediately for new behavior. The thing that I find myself doing the most is like prepping or setting up an environment for new behaviors. So if I'm going to go walking, I'll put my shoes out near the door. I'll
And
set
easy.
it I'll set an alarm and a reminder. I'll set a target for my steps that day, and I'll have it nudging me because
You can time your playlist with your exercise, having it all ready. Because
yeah,
the research also shows that music, specifically, I think 120 beats or something per minute, I forgot what I just got it on my Fitbit. It was saying like if you get music at this rate, it literally has been shown to improve um, exercise time. So that's a trick, right? But that's prepping your environment to commit to it. Yeah.
yeah. I also like sometimes even telling my daughter that we're going to go out for that walk holds me way more accountable than if I just had that as my own private plan.
Right.
Um, and then
No, I want to speak to that. I think it's really important to let the people around you, especially your children, know what to expect, that you're going to be doing these things, right? And that you're prepping the environment at times sometimes where, well, I'm going to have you color so that I can go meditate quietly, or I'm going to put this video on so I can go um, do this mindfulness app for about 5 minutes, right? That to me is prepping too. Otherwise, you're just going to have your children saying, "Hey, can you cut me up an apple?" right? Or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
No, what did you want to talk about with reinforcement?
I thought about, sometimes, like we said, as we're trying out new self-care things, there's times where they are going to help us and they're going to feel great, but there's times that there aren't. So externally reinforcing yourself for starting a practice like this, for trying to take care of yourself, even if it didn't feel so great, even if it was maybe even more stressful than if you just had your regular day, right? I
Yeah.
have my 3 kids. I had them all entertained. I tried to do this app, and I had a negative experience trying mindfulness or whatever, right? I was swarmed with thoughts and it was supposed to be great and I was supposed to feel at peace, but I didn't. So thinking about like how you praise and yourself, whether it's verbally, whether it's acknowledging, or sometimes just some external reinforcement, like I'm going to set that as my goal, and if I do that, then I get to do X, Y, and Z later.
Right. And it will require and ask of you as parents to really pay attention more to your daily activities, right? You really do need to pay attention more. And I think Vanessa, you and I could probably find some sort of tracker for the parents to write down things they tried and maybe even scale it on how well they thought it worked. And I would even consider a section to say, was this a normal day? Because what if you had like the worst day at work ever?
Yeah.
Maybe that's just going to be a day where you just feel pretty bad regardless, right? So this is more about an ongoing process outside of those unusual circumstances. Yeah, and then we talked about what to add and what to subtract. What that means is, what are you going to add to your life so that you can start these new behaviors of self-care and addressing the sources of stress. So we touched a little bit on this previously in the other slide about, well, that means having those hard conversations. That means having those boundaries. That means maybe seeking professional help if you need to, which leads to what the other aspect that we're going to add, which is new coping skills. Trying some things
Mhm.
that are different right now, especially during this pandemic when things are just extra heightened. And Vanessa and I put some resources on the last slide on some great apps that can give you some coping skills, and then some direct links to resources that literally list out different coping skills to try. And introducing new habits, that's what you're going to add. You're going to literally choose which one you think is going to be a good fit for your life, and you're going to introduce it. And that literally is adding something to your life. And then what we mean by subtract is like, well, what are you going to take out that are barriers to you being able to commit to self-care? So if you have some identified environmental stressors, then then let's be mindful of that, right? If we know that going to this particular family function every single year causes incredible stress and you're already stressed out, perhaps there's some wiggle room around that where you don't have to go for the entire time or at all. It's up to, obviously you and your family specific needs, but taking that into mind. And then mindless numbing. You're going to make the choice to instead of using numbing behaviors such as maybe binge watching or drinking or using substances to numb yourself, um, you're going to you're going to take that into consideration if it's literally becoming a problem for you, and that is not self-care anymore. It's literally something that's getting in the way of your life, and that you're now dependent on things that aren't necessarily healthy for you. I mean, I found myself doing a lot of mindless numbing, binge watching things like on Netflix. It makes it so easy to binge watch these shows, and I had um, some immediate relief, but then the next day I didn't get done the other things I needed to get done, and so it really was just very temporary. And what we're wanting with these self-care approaches is that it's not a temporary solution; it's actually a permanent solution for you that you can take and use not only during this pandemic, but even outside of this pandemic. Because let's just face it, parenting is hard all year, regardless. Even on a good day, sometimes it's hard, right? So
Yeah.
that's what this number 2 section means.
And then we have the like what to do, right? Like, so now we've got some idea. Hopefully by now you've got some ideas of areas where you would like to introduce some self-care. So what do we do with that? So first is making a plan, picking one area in your routine, one thing that you can either introduce and kind of make totally new, or kind of just lean into a little more if you're usually having that cup of coffee or tea or whatever in the morning. um, During this time, I started doing morning foot soaks, and I put something on TV, and my daughter and I sit there together and we soak our feet in the morning as I have my tea. And it's just something that felt really easy to do. And fortunately, she likes to do it. And it's a nice calming time, and she leans on me, and it's nice. But it's not always easy if you have some multiples, or if you have a teenager who would never want to be in the same vicinity or whatever, right? Would never want to do something like that. Sometimes it is just something small and achievable for yourself.
But you're
um,
highlighting something really important is that you don't have to do self-care away from your children. Like you can do it with them, right? Which even makes it easier to do it because you found something that actually works. Like I used to love when my son we would have pretend tea parties, or actually we
mhm.
pretend, and then we eventually started doing real tea parties. And I got to eat like finger sandwiches and like all these cookies, and that was fun for me. I love food, and that was very enjoyable. So it's about bringing more pleasure and reducing the stress in your life. So that was a really good point.
Yeah, and even I know you've talked to you put me onto the Calm app and into doing meditations with right with the little ones, because there's meditations for preschoolers, and they're great for us too. It's like it's just a guided in a much more child friendly way, but it's not going to take anything from an adult practice too. And it's fun, and it really can accentuate your own experience, right? But you've got to go into it with a certain lens if you're going to do mindfulness with a young one, right?
Yeah, you have to let go certain aspects. You're like, this is going to be about 2 minutes of mindfulness,
Yeah,
but I still count it, right? At the end of the day, it's my checklist, right? And I feel good about it. It actually makes me feel more accomplished for my day, which is my self-care, right? So yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Hearing your plan, right? What are you doing with your plan? What do you like? I love that I get to talk to you, Vanessa, and tell you what I'm doing. And I think we actually did it informally, where we're just kind of just
Mhm.
talking, right? And we just said what we're doing.
Mhm.
I would encourage for parents to actually make it an effort into having this discussion with people. Vanessa and I have a natural ebb and flow where we just talk about everything. If you're not a talker, like I would encourage you to talk about this one, because the
Mm-hmm.
accountability partner can make or break a plan, especially when it's in that vulnerable initial stage where it's not really a strong behavior yet.
And we can be your accountability partners too, the group, right? We start a
Definitely.
thread. My self-care is this. What's yours this week? And, you know, we need all of that external reinforcement to help like retrain our minds to do, you know, many of us were brought up thinking, and our automatic ways of functioning and how we value this activity. And
Mm-hmm.
then number 3 is following our plan. And we know that if we share it with others, we're more likely to follow through on it. And I like how you mentioned, Sherry, this part about reminding, and this is like ACT stuff, right?
It's acceptance and commitment therapy, and you all are going to hear me pull a lot of resources from this theory. I just believe very very strongly in it, and it's about your values as a parent. So the reinforcement isn't necessarily like, you know, getting praise for it, or maybe you set it up where you get some sort of like, I get to go out for my special food if I do these things. Like let it come intrinsically, where you're doing this because you're here as a parent that wants to show up in the right ways for your child. This self-care is how you can show up consistently. Otherwise, you're going to be depleted, and you're going to be constantly competing with the symptomologies of stress, which can show up as anxiety or depression, avoiding. And so, as a parent, if you can tap into your values and why you're going to do the hard work of adding extra work into your life, right, which can feel overwhelming, I ask that you dive in deep and look at why you're motivated to do this. And I can actually post um, some self-guided worksheets that help you identify your values, and that you can use that for yourself. So look for that in our files coming up. And it literally is this simple. Like, self-care, it can be this simple, that you're paying attention to yourself is caring. And the act of practicing self-compassion is caring. So being kind to yourself when you might snap a little bit, or when maybe you didn't want to hang out with your child and they're asking you to hang out, like be kind to yourself. Or even when you feel like you were just your worst self with your child, really, really be kind to yourself. All of that. If you don't want to do any of the other examples, you literally can just do this. And this is actually an act of self-care. And we want to make this attainable for all of you, because we know the struggles, parents. And the mission here is that we all get through this together.
Mm-hmm. So
And
important. Oh, and then we have our resources, huh? Wow.
we have some good ones. I particularly love the COVID coach app that I got turned on to by another psychologist. It literally has apps within the app, and you get to pick kind of like the different topics. I put in the ones that were the mental health apps, help kids cope. How helpful would that be? Just to look and see what's out there. It's like through the veterans, some sort of veterans department that put this wonderful app together for us. And so I put in the link here for you to be able to tap on. But you can literally just look COVID coach app up on whatever app site you use, and there's some ACT in there. So that's acceptance, commitment therapy on coaching, and then anger and irritability management skills. How useful is that right now? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there is a soaring rate of child abuse happening right now, and it's not necessarily because everybody's just bad parents. Just these are very very trying times, and parents
Mm-hmm.
are tested beyond their capacity, and they need to tap into these extra resources. And so yeah, these are just some examples.
And I think going back to like when we talked about like emotions and taking care of our like emotional self, I put these podcasts just to learn more about psychology and the mind, and they're places where lots of people are sharing very vulnerable things. The Knowledge Project is a good one. I was just listening to the Happy Habits on there, and the Armchair Expert. That's a with Dak Shepard.
Yeah, he's funny.
And Monica, and they're, they have experts come in. So they have John Gottman and they have Brene Brown episodes and they have Esther Perel, but then they have lots of stars, and um, I really, they're just really, really good episodes on there. And then the Feminist Survival Project is by Emily Nagoski and Amelia Nagoski, and they go through, they have self-care and how we react to stress, and they're more focused around the political climate and just how we all survive. And then we have just a whole other list, many
Yeah,
things.
everyone. Like, just tinker around and find the ones you like. And then, and I like that you share the podcast that you like. So these podcasts aren't necessarily psychoeducational. Maybe some of them are, but it's really about finding time to listen to things that are enjoyable, right? Like that guy, like that you turned me on to the Armchair Expert, and he's hilarious. Like it's fun to listen to. So it's about bringing more joy into your life through all of these little actionable steps. And we will put this slideshow presentation up into the file so that you have access to it. Please reach out to us and let us know if maybe some of the links aren't working or if you want more information. And please leave comments. Let's create a group where there is a virtual congregation and people are connecting. Even if it you don't have to write a full blog, but just like give if you could share comments on maybe which ones are working for you, or maybe which ones didn't work for you and why. And I asked everyone to just kind of chime in a little bit about self-compassion. What are you doing? What kind of acts of self-compassion did you exercise this week? Like today, I personally went a little haywire on my daughter because I panicked about her potentially having a cavity, and it just came from this really strange place, and I was being really mean to her, and my old me would have been really, really hard on myself. But this time I was just like, I apologized. I just said, you know what? I didn't get a lot of sleep. And I was kind of stressed a lot. And my daughter is a little bit, she's 6 years old, so I could talk to her, but I made sure just to like do that repair work, but I let it go. I didn't be like, I messed up my kid for life because I just acted like a maniac today. So that's just one personal example out of many. And I'm sure all of you have some, and we would love to hear more about your ins and outs with your children.
Yeah, I always feel so validated and normalized when you share examples like that, because I feel like there were probably three, and like today my husband at one point said, you two are at each other, and I was like, no, she's not behaving, and like, look at that, right? Like, I'm putting it on her, like not
Self-care, right? You need some time. Yeah. So we are in this with you all. We're practicing it, and we have our wins and we have our fails, and or whatever we call fails, learning, right? Learning opportunities. But we are we're with you, and we're glad you're here, and we're so glad that so many of you have joined our group, and let us know what else you want to hear. We can throw out some more polls, and hopefully we get some votes in. But I think
all right, guys. Well, until next time, we're looking forward to, I think our next one will be on isolation. So stay tuned for that one. Either isolation or homeschool challenges, right? One of those two.
Right. All right. So thank you for your time, and have a wonderful evening or day. Okay.
Bye.